This is Tyrese Haliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Setting the Pace, your go-to Pacers podcast. Joining us once more is friend of the show, but enemy for the time being. He has hands down one of the best podcast voices in the game. He is Bob Schmidt, host of the Fear of the Fro podcast. Bob, how are you?
Good. Well, as good as can be expected, Facci.
I
I'm
think
not,
so.
I'm not as good as I was on the last appearance.
That's probably true.
Significantly less good, but I'm holding it together.
There's still some good in there, is what it sounds like. Look, what is it worth? I don't want to backhand compliment you, but it was a good, highly contested game in game two, given the injury situation, to Cleveland Cavaliers. I think that's a good starting point. Is like you tell me, last time we had you on, I asked for the status of Darius Garland. I did not expect that he would be out for game one. Didn't expect he'd be out for game two. Now we're hearing that if this was the regular season, he could be out for upwards of a week or more. Then obviously Evan Mobley, DeAndre Hunter, they suffer injuries in game one. They miss game two. Do you have any sort of feeling as to what the status could be for them?
I think Mobley is the least likely of all of them
Mm.
because from what they inferred it's a high ankle sprain. That's what I keep seeing. And Kenny didn't hedge. He didn't say, I think, he's like, if we can get a couple of them back. I think he's leaving the door open that maybe Darius or Hunter would. But if I had to rank them in terms of my expectations of who you might see for game three, I would put Hunter at the top of the list. Then
Mm.
I'd say Darius. And I'd say it's an extreme long shot that you'll see Mobley. I think, yeah, I mean, if it is truly a high ankle sprain, if those reports, if there's validity to them, and they're not coming from the team, it's just kind of some of the guys around the team. I don't see him, he might not even be here for the series unless it gets stretched out considerably. So that's kind of the expectation I'm going with. But the tough part with the Cavs is, and Cavs fans experienced this firsthand. This happened last playoff run
It did.
when Jared Allen went out. The initial reporting on the injury was fairly vague. It didn't say broken rib. Was it a bruised rib? Is it a broken rib? Eventually they say it's a pierced rib, which nobody even knew what that meant afterwards. And then at media day, you find out he had a floating rib fragment just swimming around in there. Which, if that had been more definitive, I don't think he would have taken all the bullets because there's this whole narrative about softness. And I see it. It's the thing I disdain the most about our fans who are now going back to clips from game two who sit there and say, well, they're laughing on the bench. It's like we were up
Oh my
20
God.
at the time. Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing, guys? Well, like, where are all these couch doctors coming from who are telling you what they would have done in these circumstances? So while I don't think the team necessarily does these guys any favors by rolling forward this idea that maybe they'll play, maybe they won't, just to set them up for disappointment, based off just the experience we've had in the past few years in terms of what's actually transpired versus the language they use. Because Kenny, just in his last press conference after game one, talked about how he kind of uses questionable and doubtful interchangeably, which of course they're completely separate things.
Yes, they
But
are.
but yeah, so it's frustrating, but I think going in, if you get one of the three of them, I'll be
It
happy.
helps.
I think there's 0% chance you're getting all three, and I don't think Mobley's playing.
Yeah, and that's really tough. Mobley obviously saw he rolled his ankle in that game. So, I know we've seen whatever it is, you're going to get some part of the Cavs fan base that might have thought, the Pacers are hurting players. That no, that was a freak, roll of the ankle.
That one, truthfully, in that game, Facci, that one was, I think that's the most foolproof, like clearly no intention, because
Yeah.
Miles isn't really even looking at him by the
Mhm.
time that he came down on his foot. Like that was clearly accidental. Either of the other two, I think, would be a more valid case to be upset about. It's
Yeah.
just the impact of losing Mobley is so much more significant.
It's huge. And I was surprised because look, you're talking about the defensive player of the year who was out. I thought the Cavs played fantastic defense through for like three quarters at least in the game, especially the first quarter where the Pacers had what I think 13 points in the game. I mean, they couldn't really do anything early on. So I thought the Cavs did the whole like rallying around, hey, you're still at
Yeah.
home and you're just playing. Everyone was playing like above their means. So I was worried. I really was. So maybe Garland comes back. We don't know how good he'll be, if he does come back, because obviously then it feels like, hey, you're kind of maybe rushing him back. But you tell me on a panic meter of 1 to 10, where is the fan base at right now, being down 2 games to nothing, going back to Indiana?
Well, I think it's considerably more. I would say after the first game, there was an element of like, okay, outlier hot shooting.
Sure. And we were really hot in game one. I didn't think that was going to be sustainable. So I could
Well,
see.
if you think about this is a crazy stat. So true shooting percentage, right? The first round, where we spoke just a handful of days ago. I told you that the Cavs won those 4 games by an average margin of 30.5 points. They had a true shooting percentage of 66.5%. This round, the Pacers are at like 64.5%.
Crazy right now.
So yeah, so they were the second best efficiency team in the first round just to the Cavs, and they were still over 60% true shooting, only other team in the playoffs to do that. And they've carried that forward and improved upon it in round 2. So I would say after the first game, yeah, people were panicked about the injuries to some extent because nobody wants to get through a season. We were kissed by the gods during the regular season. Very few injuries of significance. The majority of them were bench guys. So then to have that happen, and it's almost worse. I was saying this to you like when we were chatting about setting up the scheduling for this. I would have handled it better if we just got boat raced in game 2. But knowing how slim the margin for error is and how hard of a team this is going to be to put away, giving away a game like that in a historic fashion where, I heard you say it on the stat on the podcast. I've seen this all over today. The idea that it's only happened 3 times and twice of them are in this playoff run for the Pacers, it's crushing. It's absolutely crushing because you could fixate on any individual component. You could fixate on the bad inbound that gets stolen by Nembhard. You could take the dunk off the Siakam miss. You could take what happened with Haliburton. Any one of those moments, or the elbow to the face by Donovan Mitchell. Any one of those moments, you just remove one of them, and it doesn't happen. But every single thing that had to go wrong did go wrong in succession. And then you end up where you are feeling like you threw away a game that the difference, it's not just one game. Winning a game, shorthanded 3 of your top 6 or 7 guys would have meant so much more to this team than just one game. And then the end outcome is essentially you have people questioning your toughness. You have people questioning your execution. You have people questioning your coach, who's literally been questioned not at all this year. And for the first time, I think people look at Kenny, they look at those comments he said in the post game where he just was harping on the grabbing and the clutching. And that's not a Kenny trick. Kenny is the type that just always would take the high road, praise the other guy, don't complain. Or even when he complains he couches it with, oh, this is the toughest job in the world. The refs have the toughest job. I think you could sense the frustration and sort of the projecting in that post-game press conference in a way that we haven't seen.
I think so, and I'm trying not to be on my high horse this because I'm on the opposite end of this, where it was the most magical comeback you could ever, be a part of. And here's where I don't feel as bad is because you guys, 2018, I saw the clip. LeBron on that 3-pointer. It was from basically the same exact spot where Tyrese Haliburton hit his, where LeBron ripped our heart out when he hit that 3 at the buzzer for the Cavs to win in 2018. For Haliburton to do it in about the same spot almost felt like a, revenge coming back around all these years later. But, that's why, never say never in the playoffs. And I feel like when you're seeing what the Pacers did, and you mentioned it, how they've now had 2 of these comebacks in the past week. There's something special about this Pacers team is like in close games, they're not scared. If you, we're listening to the episode that you mentioned, Tyrese now on tying or go-ahead shots in the final, there was 2 minutes. He's 10 of 11 this year. 10 of 11. We're talking about a guy shooting 91% in the clutch. Like, how is this even possible? You can't even do that in a video game. So it just feels like, you tell me, Tyrese Haliburton through 3 quarters had 8 points.
It was unbelievable.
In the final minute and 24 seconds. You guys did an unbelievable job. I saw Dean Wade on him at a bunch of times. They had length. They were really taking him out of the game for most. I mean, Tyrese, not like him, a guy who's leading the playoffs in assists, had just, I think, 4 assists in the game. So he's got, barely any stats at all. I mean, what did you think of Tyrese being kind of held out of the game for most of it and then comes alive when it matters most?
It makes it that much more painful seeing him holding his hand, thinking like, oh,
I was worried. I was
maybe
shook.
maybe he's injured, and then he comes out in that 4th quarter. And then also just on that play, I'm sure you guys have covered this angle, but you could have almost done anything and it would have been a better outcome than letting him retreat to the 3-point line. Foul him intentionally. Put him back on the line for another 2. Get a different guy in who's not Ty Jerome, who's having the worst game of his career objectively with the Cavs anyway. because you alluded to Dean Wade. I think that's the one thing you said. Oh, you were a little bit surprised, and I heard you say these guys look maybe they were better without Evan Mobley, which of course I think a big part of that is because people just recklessly underestimate what Dean Wade is capable of. He's not Evan Mobley, but he's a very serviceable defensive player. And even in that stretch where we lost Garland and Mobley to injuries during last regular season, where they stormed through that January run and they were like 18-2, and they had the best analytics in all of basketball, that was propped up on Allen, Mitchell, and then Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, and Max Strus. Max Strus had a fantastic game yesterday. Okoro had moments. Dean Wade was very impactful. I just think when they got to the second half, they shortened the rotation to their detriment. Those guys were so burned out.
They were gassed.
Yeah. And we shifted back to exactly what I told you I felt like had changed this year, which was a share the wealth element. And because of the injuries, effectively, it's become Donovan Mitchell hero ball. And the only outlet we have for a guy who can create his own seemingly is so far into his head that he put forth a game where the fact we were winning in a game where Ty Jerome is 1 for 14 deep into the fourth quarter is, I mean, that was objectively horrible on every measure. It wasn't like he was getting past guys. He was getting to floaters and he was short arming them, front rimming them. The first game he was getting blocked by Miles Turner, Tyrese Haliburton. It's to go from 5 games, and I'm counting game 1 in this series, of Ty Jerome doing 17, 5, and 4 on 48-44 splits to 2 points on 1 of 14 shooting or whatever it was, and just some critical mistakes down the stretch. I don't fault him for Tyrese making the shot over him at the end. That I put more on Kenny for even having him in there in what was clearly not his game. But the not being able to free yourself to get the inbound, you can divide the blame pie there between Max Strus throwing it in a way where Nembhard could kind of discard him and steal it, or Ty not fighting hard enough to hold him off. Whatever you want to say, there was just too many moments late in that game where, I mean, we got lucky. The ball went out of bounds on you guys in that one sequence where, everybody got on the floor. Ty almost lost it there.
Yeah, that was, yeah. Oof.
I didn't pull the clip, but I remember saying to you guys, what makes me confident? DeAndre Hunter and Ty Jerome. Hunter's out of the series, and Ty Jerome objectively gave us a game. The only silver lining here, Facci, for me as a Cavs fan, is that I've spent the majority of the second half of this season panicking about the price tag of Ty Jerome rising and rising and rising. And now what people are going to remember about Ty Jerome's season for the majority of non-Cavalier fans is, oh my God, did he lay an egg in game 2 of that Pacers series? Because this game was the second most painful loss I've ever experienced. The only one I think, well, number 1 is the J.R. Smith game, where the stakes were higher. But both share a similarity. You wasted resume legacy level games. Yeah, a LeBron James and a Donovan Mitchell. For Donovan Mitchell to nearly do 50 points with a single 3-pointer.
1 of 11, and he did damage. I mean, look, for 1 of 11, I mean, it was crazy that he struggled from 3 in this series. Yeah. He's like,
he's missing free throws at the end that are like
that was a big thing. So
it was.
Whatever it was, there was
he was like 15 of 21, 16 of 20, but somewhere in there. Yeah, I have the exact figures, but at the end, you could tell the fatigue and being gassed was a couple more of those. And again, we're not in the same spot, but just it's just he had a 42% usage rate, Facci. Yeah, 42%, and that's with 2 back-to-back games where they've used Ty Jerome to try to lighten the load. And it's just you can't put that on a guy and lose those games. It's just so crushing.
I mean, Mitchell was already tired, but obviously after the putback dunk where Nesmith comes down on him, and then when I mean, it felt like this guy was taking body shots in a boxing match.
I'm listening to Hoop Collective this morning, and they're talking about how it should be a foul. I'm like, just let us just soak in our loss, okay? Like, don't make it worse. The guy got that. If that's a foul on him, that's the most embarrassing way to foul.
I know.
He essentially got like a noogie down to the hardwood. It's like just just let us lick our wounds.
I know. Look, hey, it's going to be tough, and especially you got to sit in it for a little bit longer because they don't play again until Friday. But I felt like going back to the point on Ty Jerome, You're not talking about in game one, Mitchell and Ty Jerome combined for 50 shots. In game two, it's 48. It's a lot of shots between two players. Obviously, you could see the Pacers' strength all season long has been depth. Obviously, Cleveland had more depth before these injuries, but does that worry you to be like, all right, Mitchell can shoot 21 free throws and have 30 shots and go off for near 50, and that's still not enough because
No,
the
this
second
isn't.
guy
Yeah,
is going 1 of 14.
it's not sustainable. Like you can't. I fully believe these people who are off the Ty Jerome bandwagon. I'm like, guys, you wait. What happens next game if he goes and gives you an efficient 20? Are we then all of a sudden just going to be like, well, no, this is the real him now? Like the sample of work over the regular season in high leverage moments through the whole first round of the playoffs is that Ty Jerome shows up when it matters. But I think there's a part of him that's just, it was inside his head last game. He got swatted so many times in that first game that in this game, even when he got free in game two, he was short rim and stuff. So my feeling is the most damaging part of missing Darius and not having Evan as a release valve when you guys trap and come up high on those guys is like late in that game. And I heard you say it on the pod. When Max Strus hit that three at the end of the game,
like a soda can. Honestly, I was just when he hit that, I was like, that's it. That's got to be it.
but even the setup to that, Facci, was you brought a strong double at Donovan, and he threw what I would say was the riskier pass.
It was.
So those are the moments where it's like you've got three options without Darius Garland. You've got Donovan Mitchell, you've got Ty Jerome, and normally I would say I would trust those two interchangeably. And then a step below that, I would say you have Craig Porter Jr. He might be the safe player, but he's not going to blow past people and take advantage of it in the way that a Ty Jerome or a Donovan Mitchell does. So you get to the end of the game, and what cost us was we don't have those guys who will just fight to get loose from the grabs and the clutches and stuff. And again, I'm not saying that that's the way people are going to play you in the playoffs. You need people who have just the sheer force of will to expel those people, to discard them, to get to the ball. And Ty Jerome and Donovan Mitchell are it right now. The Max maybe. I guess you could say Max too. But those three guys, that is the biggest loss of it. Darius Garland is that composure under pressure, because we talked about what a clutch guy he was. I mean, even in the first round, a 5-to-1 assist to turnover ratio for Darius. It's closer to 2.5 for Donovan Mitchell. It's too much to put on the guy. And at the end of the game, you burned all your timeouts trying to inbound the ball. And then if you had wanted to challenge that moment where they called Ty Jerome for the push in the back, which they confirmed, by the way, on the 2-minute report. So for whatever that's worth. So even if they had challenged that, I guess you can assume they would have lost it. But not having the ability to challenge it because you didn't have a timeout was also somewhat crushing. So those are the things that it's like they need to figure out a way. I think they can hold on defense in the absence of these guys, even with Evan out, because I think Dean and Isaac are such good defenders that them getting elevated into larger roles will be fine. But you can't trust those guys to create for themselves. Guys like Dean and guys like Isaac and even Sam to a lesser extent. Sam has a little bit of movement to him, but you can't rely on those guys to just give me the ball, go get a bucket. No. It becomes all on Donovan. And without Darius, it was diminished a bit by the big-to-big action of Mobley and Allen, but now Mobley's out. So I think you're going to get a lot of the same where it's like, okay, if Donovan doesn't give you a 40-piece, a 50-piece, it could get ugly.
It could. And I felt like what was frustrating on my end of this, and I guess who am I to complain given what happened, but like how many and ones did Donovan Mitchell have in that game? It must have been 4 or 5 that every time I was like, oh my God. Like if you're going to get fouled, fine, but do you have to make it each time? So he really was putting on like you said, like a resume making type of performance, throw the team on your back. And that was worrying me because you at least knew who was going to be taking the shots. And sometimes with the Pacers, you want Tyrese to shoot the ball more. Siakam has been a little bit of a ghost in this series. Siakam had 2 shots at halftime. Haliburton had maybe 4, and Mitchell had 16 shots at halftime. And I was like, at least they know what they're doing and what the game plan is.
Well,
spreading it around.
That's the thing we talked about. 48 points, one 3-pointer. Well, the reason for that is because he gets to the line 20 times. And I'd be frustrated if I found myself thinking that. I'm like, here I am, angry about a lane violation, and Donovan Mitchell has 20 free throws. That doesn't happen. This is a guy who averages like 5.5 per game on the season. He paid for that foul, like he paid for those drives to the rim, though,
Yeah,
into the stanchion, onto the floor. And I agree with what you said on the pod this morning when I listened, which is like, yeah, sometimes I think he was just throwing himself in to get the whistle because he thought that was his best way of generating points because it just wasn't coming from other sources as the game wore on. They started out shooting well. Sam hits his first 3 triples. I think he missed his next 5, something to that effect. It got so much, and it happened in the Orlando series last year too, where he just takes over to the point where sometimes I think guys step back and they need to get more from those ancillary pieces. From Jared Allen, he has to do more. Max Drew stepped up. I'll give Max and I'll give Dean a ton of credit. I thought those 2 guys were the most important players outside of Donovan Mitchell, and I was super pleased with Max Strus.
Jared Allen had a quietly good game, like 22 and 12. It didn't feel like a dominant type of performance or anything like that, but I do feel like you need more out of others. And that's kind of brings me to my next point is like, what are you thinking on the other end? I would love to get I'm curious what Cavs fans think of like guys like Andrew Nembhard who are averaging 18 and 9.5 in this series on 50% shooting and 50% from 3. Guys like Aaron Nesmith, who are averaging 16 and 6 on 62% shooting and 64% from 3. Like when you talk about true shooting percentage, I saw that in the NBA playoffs right now, through from first round to now, out of the top 5 guys in true shooting percentage, the Pacers have 3 of them between Nembhard, Nesmith, and Miles Turner. Are you guys just like these are role players that are playing like elite level role playing right now?
Well, I would say I feel that way with Nesmith. I feel like Nembhard gave us the best game we could have asked for last game. 8 turnovers.
Yeah.
He had a 3-pointer. Now, he made plays when it mattered at the end, but by and large, I felt like, okay, he balanced out an insane game 1 with a pretty underwhelming game 2, especially considering what he's done over the course of the whole playoffs when you take that in totality, which you pointed to with the true shooting percentage and everything. With Miles, I feel like I was okay with he had a big third quarter, and ultimately I think that when you had Siakam and him out there and the Cavs were going with so many small ball iterations, like the times Jared Allen was off the floor, I mean, I expect Miles to get a fair amount. He had moments. Truthfully, in the fourth quarter, you guys would have probably come back quicker if he didn't miss so many bunnies around the rim. Like it
was like 3-point blank, and I was like, I can't.
And he was getting mismatches.
He had a good game, but my God, you got to convert those.
So I was okay with Miles. I felt like Nembhard gave us a great game in terms of if you're a Cavs fan, you're like, yes, he's traveling, he's turning the ball over.
He didn't hit any threes after going like 5 of 6 in game 1, and he was a bad 3-point shooter this year. He's not a guy who just, strokes it from downtown. Like in game 1, I knew that was as good as it was going to get from a 3-point shooting standpoint for him. In game 2, obviously, he was nowhere to be found from a 3-point shooting standpoint. But also, you talk about turnovers. The Cavs the Pacers are turning the ball over 17.5 times in 2 games. This Pacers team protected the rock so good for so long. They were having single-digit games. They ended up having like a franchise record. It was like 6 single-digit turnover games in a row at one point to close out, like maybe like the beginning of April or so. So like that's what they were doing great. Now they're coughing up the ball left and right. What do you think that the Cavs are doing well to be able to force those type of turnovers?
Well, I do think a lot of the guys that play in these injury-riddled situations are pretty solid defenders, specifically speaking to Isaac and Dean. Javonte Green is a bit of a ball hawk. He got a couple turnovers there. Craig had a moment here and there. I think the first quarter is abnormally bad. The fact that you then ripped off 3 30-point quarters, I think, it lessens the impact. But that was just such an incredibly great first quarter. Then you get to the fourth quarter. You guys score 26 points in the paint. And it's like, okay, guys, you're giving up second chances. You're doing all the things. And I know we spoke about it on the preview pod. The biggest concern for Cavs fans coming into this is you have to limit the second chance points. You have to end possessions. And I told you I felt okay about that because historically, you're not a team with the Pacers who is dominant on the offensive glass. But in that game, you get take out the free throw run and dunk. Nesmith got another offensive rebound just in live action that he put in late in that game. That's like those are crippling mistakes. Those are crippling mistakes of execution where I get it. You're fatigued. You're playing a short rotation. These guys are used to spreading the wealth, having a longer. I think Kenny did allude to that in the postgame. He's like, I wish we played more guys. I heard Winhurst say, well, the defense is what's let him down these last 2 games. Truthfully, I don't feel that way.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I feel like we've shifted to an unsustainable pattern of offense where even in the first game, where we're considerably more healthy, we didn't really feed the ball to Evan and Jared Allen. Were they effective and efficient? Absolutely. But their touches were so minimal. We have gone far too heliocentric in this way. And whether that's just on the basis of Donovan can't rely on the other guys to do what you need to do, that's the way that we have to play, though, in order to win. I'm more concerned about the offense with these injuries than I am with the defense. Because, again, like people would have told you when they tore down Darius in round 1, I don't think that losing Darius is going to crush us on the defensive end. More opportunity for Dean, I think, is generally a good thing when it comes to having Siakam and Miles Turner out there. I think Dean is a positive defender. It's just he's so passive offensively that I think Donovan knows. I don't think it's a coincidence that Donovan and Ty are shooting 50 shots a game. It's because they know how passive the guys who are filling the void underneath a Mobley and a Hunter are, and they don't feed tons of looks to your Deans and your Isaacs. It's just not the way this team plays.
Yeah, and it's tough because, you're getting stripped of your depth. I mean, I made a joke on the last podcast. The Pacers played 11 guys in the first quarter. I mean, they're just rolling them out there left and right. And for a while, it was frustrating because it's like, okay, now we're starting to see guys play a little bit too long. I think at halftime, I think TJ McConnell might have had like 2 more minutes than Haliburton did. And then you look at the end of the game, and as time wore on and the Pacers played their reserves a little bit longer in the third quarter, it meant that in the fourth quarter, their starters were going to be fresh and they were going to be able to go after it. And you saw, a Pacers team that was still able to play fast, was still able to make the plays they needed to be. And you saw a Cavs team that Jared Allen looked tired. Donovan Mitchell looked tired. And obviously we know what effect that played. But what have you seen that the Cavs have done well to really kind of take Siakam a little bit out of it? Because Siakam was our all-star this year. He was Mr. Consistency. The guy was dropping 20 points, what felt like a calm, not a loud 20 points, just about every night. He's averaging about 14.5 points in this series, just 12 points last game. He had 2 shots by halftime. What have you seen that the Cavs have done well on him?
Well, I think a lot of the credit has to go to Dean. He's a very fundamentally sound defender. I think you saw a lot of that last game. And I know we talked about that one of the games in January. I thought Siakam had his way with Dean a little bit. I think Dean's held up very, very well. I think the fact, too, they switch in zone looks here and there where it's like, okay, I find you guys end up swinging it around the perimeter so much that a lot of times they just don't look to force the ball to Siakam. I think some of it, though, is just I think that Siakam is capable at any point of just having a much louder game.
He's due.
It just doesn't feel like the Pacers have felt like they need to force the issue. And the momentum swingers in these games for the Pacers have come from the perimeter, have come from, what you're getting from Nesmith and Nembhard and then Miles Turner to some extent. So plus, I do think what we were seeing a lot of it is, you get into these situations where when you're Tyrese and they switch Allen out onto you, could he feed it into Siakam? Sure, but he is roasting Jared Allen right now. Like, he's not looking to throw it over top of him. He's looking to take him to the rim, to use his speed and his agility to create separation and take those looks, presumably because he thinks that they're better looks. And how can you argue with it when again, Tyrese Haliburton, they may not put the whole offensive load on him, but he's again having a ridiculously efficient, playoff run here.
Mm-hmm. No, he is, and I think that it's we get frustrated at times as Pacer fans because you want him to be more engaged. We saw at one point he made his first shot, Tyrese that is, and then he doesn't take any shots for a while. Then at halftime he's 3 of 4, and you're like, okay, if the ball's going in, why don't you just shoot it a little bit more? But he tends to struggle with being too aggressive, wants to set up his teammates. But I felt like it went from, man, this is frustrating. Tyrese just isn't like shooting the ball to all of a sudden, hey, you know what? He's going to make plays when you need him to make plays. So that is exactly what he did. But as we kind of wrap up over here, is there 1 or 2 adjustments you think maybe Cleveland could make in game 3? Obviously, we saw they shook up the starting lineup because they had to, but do you see any other changes? Maybe it's even defensive changes?
Well, here's what I would say. I wasn't in favor of starting Ty. I guess I was less opposed to it when I knew that Hunter was going to be out because then the whole dynamic of breaking them up seemed less relevant. But my thing is, Ty's going to play 30 minutes alongside Donovan anyway. I would have preferred to keep the structure the way it was, because Ty's not a guy that's been dropped in the starting lineup. And I'm not going to say that's the reason he struggled. I just think it was an off game. I think he was in his head. I think it spiraled. Every missed shot compounded into further ones. What I would like to see is, especially considering what happened at the end of the game there, I think they can run a little bit more rotation. I think they can work in Craig Porter Jr. I liked his minutes, as short as they were. I think they can work in a Javonte Green, even a Jalen Tyson. Those two, Javonte Green and Jalen Tyson, rebound well above their size. Even Craig Porter Jr., he's a fairly good athlete. He can jump pretty high. Those are things where I think you got to at least consider in a situation where you're struggling to get the ball in and deal with the pressure that Indiana puts on. You have to at least consider giving Craig Porter Jr. some minutes, because you've seen that Sam and Okoro aren't super comfortable in those roles. And I think Okoro's still going to play a lot. I think he's been very effective when they have tasked him with guarding Tyrese Haliburton. But I guess my critique would be, you have to run a little bit deeper bench, because the Cavaliers did this to themselves to an extent by tightening up the rotation, which I think everybody tells you conventionally you have to do in playoff basketball. But when the quality of guys 8 to 11 is relatively comparable, I don't care. Play more of them. We can't get to the end of the game and have Donovan Mitchell hitting Nesmith in the face with an elbow because he's just exhausted and he's just tired of being dogged the whole game. That was a huge possession, and I don't think it happens if the workload wasn't as immense on him as it is. So
I mean, just look at how long it took him to get off the ground. I mean, he threw the elbow and he just looked so exhausted at that point.
I feel bad for the guy. I really do. I don't. It's disappointing to waste that, because that was just a truly transcendent performance by him.
And you know what? Maybe it means nothing, but for what it's worth, the last time we saw Jalen Tyson play some serious minutes, he dropped 31 points on the Pacers at the end of the regular season in that epic, I think it was a double overtime, or at least it was a overtime game, that came down.
He's a hell of a rebounder. He's a hell of a rebounder for size. It's just, essentially it's, we look at all the intangibles these guys have. Jalen's a great rebounder for his size. Craig Porter Jr. can, jump out of the gym, and he can ball handle a little bit. He's not an attack you point guard, but he's a don't turn it over point guard. And then you have a Javonte Green, who's a ball hawk, who's a pretty solid on-ball defender, and who can rebound above his size. Problem is, you only have so many spots on the court, and ultimately in this injury-riddled lineup, it goes Donovan, Jared Allen, Max Strus, and then I probably look to Dean Wade as the next most critical player for me, because I think those guys are guys who have very important roles against this Pacers team, ones that need to log huge minutes. But who you play beyond that is situational to what you're giving up to this Pacers team. And at the end of the game, what they were giving up was second opportunities and an inability to inbound the ball. So those are the things that they need to figure out how to address, because Donovan can't do everything.
No, he can't. You can't put all that weight on one guy. And I know the Pacers have had the knock of playing teams that are injured, and even if we're not causing the injuries, look, I don't want anyone to get hurt. So hey, bring back whoever you got. I still think it's going to be a big series, despite going back to Indiana, where the Pacers have been really great at home. I think Cleveland still has a little bit something left in the tank, but I wouldn't have been surprised if that was a bit of a crushing and defeating type of loss, for the team. I think it was on the flip side, obviously a huge momentum builder for the confidence of this Pacers team that, last year was the big run. Now they feel a little bit more battle tested. They're a little bit more mature. They're finding ways to win these single possession games. But Bob, I want to thank you for coming back on. It's always a pleasure. Like I said, I knew last time it wasn't going to be the last time I saw you, and I wouldn't be surprised if you still more.
I'm dangerously close to having to write a song for you.
You are very close, and we're going to hold you to it.
One more game of margin, and then I'm not putting pen to paper until it's official, though, because I got nothing left to do but just believe. So
that's all you can. That's all you can do. But Bob, please tell everybody where they could find you on social media and some of the awesome content you're always putting out.
At Fear the Fro Pod on Twitter, and then, but if you want to hear the podcast, then you can ignore the fact that I just turtled and hit out after last game. I got so many mailbags. I may drop one for the morning, which will be just a cope pod. So I would suggest you skip that, Pacers fans. It's just going to make you angry. A lot of mentions of refs, I'm sure, in these audio mailbags. But generally speaking, after every game, before every game, times like this, I'll repost this. I'll chop it up for my audience so they get to hear your viewpoints here. Fear the Fro Pod, wherever you podcast.
Bob, we appreciate you. Looking forward to next time. Good luck for the rest of the series, but not too much luck. All right.
You too, guys. I appreciate you having me on and being gracious winners. So
Talk soon. See you, Bob.